Okay.
Alright, class, according to the NHTSA, which stands for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in 2006 there were 16,005 fatalities according to drunk driving. In 2007 there were 15,387, and although there is a significant decrease, not significant, but 700 people decrease in fatalities, death is not an excuse for drunk driving, and drunk driving should never occur, which is why the current penalties for the crime of driving under the influence of alcohol are inadequate. Now, for those of you who don't know, the current crime is a blood alcohol content, or BAC, above 0.08. And by inadequate, I mean that they are not harsh enough, they allow for multiple offenses, and they are too relaxed. And this leads me to my first claim. The first offense penalties for the crime of driving under the influence of alcohol are too relaxed. Some general penalties that are received for drunk driving are you receive a fine, jail time, license suspension, and possibly even DUI programs that you have to go through. I know for California, you can spend up to 96 hours to 6 months in jail, pay a fine of $390 to $1,000 plus court fees, and you can have your license suspended for 6 months. Now, California is one of the most harsh on drunk driving penalties, and I also decided to choose Texas. Texas has a fine up to $2,000, which is twice California's, but they are only confined to jail no less than 72 hours and no more than 3 months. A state that is not as harsh as California or Texas is Ohio. It is a 90-day mandatory license suspension. You only have to spend 72 hours in jail, and same as California, only have to pay a fine of $250 to $1,000. And all these claims were done also by the NHTSA, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, off their website, United States DUI Laws. And this leads me to my next claim, which is the first offense penalty allows first-time offenders to repeat. According to Superior Interlock Services, which is a company that distributes IIDs, which are ignition interlock devices, an average of 1,500,000 people are arrested for drunk driving each year. Of those 1,500,000, 50% are convicted of a second crime, and of those 750,000, 600,000 repeat a third, fourth, fifth, or sixth time. And that is unnecessary. Now, there are ways to prevent repeat offenses, and that's for bills, laws, and proposals done by assemblymen. Bill 91, which was created by Assemblyman Mark Feuer of Los Angeles, proposed a 5.5-year program which would prevent repeat drunk driving offenses. Now, this program would make mandatory for the current first time, second time, third time, fourth time, multiple time offenders to have an IID, which again is an ignition interlock device, installed into their car. Now, what would happen is when the offender would get into the car, they would have to blow into a tube that would measure their blood alcohol content. If it is above 0.08, the car will not start. In conclusion, the current laws allow for multiple time offenses. There should not be a second or third time because it could lead to death, and it is unnecessary. And the new bills that are being passed, the bill that I just mentioned was passed or proposed on October 12, 2009, yesterday. These bills and proposals would make the laws adequate to prevent drunk driving. Thank you. Done. Praise Jesus. Got on my face.
I'd be nervous because I'm like, I don't know who he was on.
Lay it on me, Judge.
All right, I was getting there. Just taking me a while here. You've got the statistic for an attention device, that's fine. You do state the proposition, although you don't really highlight that that's the claim. The supporting points were very nicely laid out, and so it's pretty easy to follow. I do think that the stuff on a couple of the points is really informational in nature as opposed to making an inference. On the first point, for instance, where you've got all the data about the number of drunk driving incidents, it seems to be like an assumption that if we have any, then the laws are inadequate, and I think you need to show, for instance, when you make that big comparison between the different states, you've got Texas, Ohio, and California's laws, you know, well, if they all have different kinds of penalties and different degrees of enforcement, do they have different results as a consequence? That would be something that would tell us that one set of rules works more effectively than another, and we don't get any follow-through on something like that. On the third point, you kind of illustrate, you know, that there's this alternative about the IIDs, and I think that that's an interesting idea. It's been around a long time. The question is, have they been effective? Are there courts, for instance, that have applied them in other places, utilized them, and it's found that you cut down on the repeat offenders or prevented accidents, or even an authority who believes it's likely to do that, quoting that person would be something better than just saying, well, then it's not going to happen. Because I'm just sitting here thinking, you know, anybody breathes in the tube, you know, it doesn't identify your DNA when you breathe in the tube, just your BAC, and you know, so it's one of those things where, you know, how do they fix those kinds of things? Have they got something where they know it works? And we don't get any proof that it works. We just have the notion that here's something that could happen. So I think that that's the one weak argument in the presentation, that this alternative would in some way be more effective. You did an okay job citing the sources. You are kind of dependent on the NHTSA for a lot of the data, but of course it's a pretty authoritative source for the factual data and the statistics that you have. The information about the IID, for instance, I think that you needed to develop more background information on it. And again, you know, you got the assemblyman whose bill it is. I'm sure that that person had some kind of information that they used in advocating its passage and signing, so we should be able to get some information like that. All right.